Welcome back to Cinema Flicks Music Picks. I'm Davey, your host with the most, the beast with the least. Least we can do today is have a look at some Hammer Halloween horror homes. Oh, kind of ruining that alliteration there, but regardless, you'll see the premise, as if you haven't picked up on from the title. So I'm not going to do one of those 31 days of horror and force yourself to watch too many films. It just so happened that I was in the mood to watch a movie the other night, and I picked The Hound of the Baskervilles from 1959. And then I was in the mood for a film afterwards, so I watched Horror Express from 1972. So a Hammer, a known Hammer, but both starring Messrs. Cushing and Lee, both also from Arrow Video as well. So I thought, why not join in at least parts of the fun and do a quick video, by Matt standards, on both. So start at the beginning, why not? Always a good place to start, if not always the most interesting. So Hound of the Baskervilles. The Conan Doyle estate at the time were very controlling over what could and could not be done with their great detective, and there were limitations put on a lot of the Holmes films that had been made prior. Sherlock couldn't go too far. He had to adhere very strictly to a lot of the Strand serials from whence he came. But Hammer, of course, they weren't one to adhere too closely to boundaries, were they? If they saw a line, they had to cross it. So this, in 1859, was easily the most extreme homes that had yet been made. But it's also a wonderful traditional homes now that we've had plenty of it at copyright, much more gory and much more terrifying versions of Holmes. Peter Cushing, of course, plays Holmes here. He is perfectly cast. Just even looking at the silhouette features there, it's very much like the original Conan Doyle sketches. We have Andre Morell, the great Andre Morell, as Watson, perhaps the definitive Watson, and we have Christopher Lee as Sir Henry Baskerville, with Marla Landy as the girl next door, and Meryl Streep plays the Hound of the Baskervilles. She's in everything, so versatile. So this is directed, of course, by Terence Fisher, score by James Bernard. You basically have your classic Hammer lineup here. Although Peter Bryan does the screenplay, not Jimmy Sangster. That's really the only main element missing from the kind of classic Hammer team. So also I love that you always get a postcard for upcoming Arrows. So it kind of reminds you of things would get a bit gorier in years to come. Peter Cushing would go on to play Sherlock Holmes in BBC TV's season 2 of, that's the old DVD cover, of the Sherlock Holmes adventures, replacing Douglas Wilmer. So it's wonderful if you only know that, which has now been released by the BFI, to go back and revisit this much more high production value than BBC TV, essentially shot as live in 1968, and also Peter Cushing's much more lively 10 years earlier. There's the famous Deerstalker. Look at that for a poster. You don't get them like that anymore. And that's just quintessential Holmesian, isn't it? There's Marla. There's the this film, a bit like Dr. No, completely misunderstands how deadly tarantulas are. Completely. But that's fine. That's absolutely fine. And there is himself, John Le Mesurier, from Dad's Army, Sergeant Wilson. Some lovely artwork here. A rather rosy-cheeked Sir Henry. He wouldn't be that rosy-cheeked because he's got a very bad heart condition. A bit churlish to go into the whole plot of Hound of the Baskervilles, despite by far the most famed adaptation of any Conan Doyle story. But to give a brief synopsis, so Henry Baskerville is the last of the Baskervilles and inherits the property, returns home to his ancestral home, and is told of the great Baskerville curse. And on the moors at night you will hear this terrible howl of the great hound that has plagued this family for generations and generations and generations and generations, etc., etc. So, the great detective, played by Peter Cushing himself, is called in, and he kind of feigns interest at the start. Is he interested? Not particularly. Tell you what, Watson, you go take care of this. I will remain here and audition for other movies. So it's one of the main problems with most adaptations of Hound of the Baskervilles. Sherlock disappears for a great chunk of it. However, that's not a problem here, because Andrew Morell is such a good Watson that you're just perfectly happy to spend time with him. It's not like Sir Nigel Bruce where he's bumbling, or it's not like not like one of the ones where he's just played by a slightly boring actor and you're always just waiting for Holmes to come back. This does feature a great return for Holmes. When Holmes comes back, it is one of those yes moments. But also, you're perfectly happy with Andrew Morell. You're never saying, oh, where's Sherlock? Where's Sherlock? But business does pick up when Sherlock returns. It's a wonderful Gothic adaptation of the property, as you'd expect from Hammer. It's 1959, the following up The Mummy. In fact, it was the same year as The Mummy. The following up Dracula, of course, the following up The Curse of Frankenstein. So they've got their mitts on this. And essentially it's a wonderfully tense, taut film. It's only about an hour and 22 minutes that really plays, even if you know the story backwards and forwards, which any Sherlock fan does, it really still feels quite visceral, because you're getting to see it through Peter Cushing's version of Sherlock Holmes' eyes, or you're getting to see it through Sir Henry's eyes, and everybody plays their part so well. Christopher Lee, for one who was typecast so much as the monster, is an extremely sympathetic character here as Sir Henry. He's a bit of a horn dog, but hey, he's kind. You know, when he's asked to give stuff up for the local jumbo sale, he doesn't hesitate. When Sherlock kind of winds him up that he's mixing with his with lower classes and he should be talking to his betters, Sherlock doesn't believe that. He just wants rid of him for the night to investigate. He takes umbrage at that, so he's defending lower classes and things. So Sir Henry is one for the angels. Whereas we won't go into Marla too much, Marla's character, because she's but essentially you have the great triumvirate for me of Hammer, of all of Hammer. I mean, you could have Michael Ripper in here in a small part and you would have the quartet, but you know, Cushing to me is Hammer. He's the Hammer actor. And then you have Lee as mostly the monster, but in parts like this also a wonderful character actor, and other parts where he'd be a great leading man too. But for the iconic films, he would be the monster. For other great films like Devil Rides Out and things, yeah, oh boy. And Andrew Morell, fantastically underrated. He should be up there in the pantheon. Anybody who hasn't seen Cash on Demand and wants to see this Holmes and Watson playing off each other in a very different style, see Cash on Demand as soon as you can. Beg, borrow or steal, because it is one of the best Hammer films you will ever see. Ever. It's fantastic. It's a bank heist movie. That's all I'm going to tell you about it, but it's stunning. So this is perhaps a definitive version of the Gothic type of Hound of the Baskervilles. Again, it's been overdone so much for some reason, and I suspect it's because it has something as easily horrifiable, to come up with a word, as a spooky hound out on the moors, that attracts filmmakers in shorthand in the way that, say, investigating, I don't know, the little Matchstick Men drawings and some of the other Holmes adventures, or the Red-Headed League, or that kind of thing. It doesn't have the same kind of sexiness, if you will, or the Blue Carbuncle. It doesn't have the same appeal. So Hound of the Baskervilles gives you that instant horror attraction, but ultimately in other versions it does fall flat because Holmes disappears for so long. Again, not an issue here, because you're just so excited when he does come back, and so happy to spend some time with Andre Morel, who is brilliant, just absolutely brilliant, and get to know everyone involved. So yeah, this is a 10 out of 10 for me. And I've seen dozens of adaptations of Hound of the Baskervilles, and yeah, if this isn't top, I don't know what is. Frankly, this is numero uno. So I said to myself, what shall I watch next? Do another Hound of the Baskervilles, do some Jeremy Brett, do some Vasily Levinov or Matt Frewer. No. But we'll stick with the same actors. Oh, I'm doing the Cushing finger. We shall stick with the same actors, and move over to Horror Express. What I like about this film is that your dichotomy changes. So this is a Peter Cushing film, really, even though he's missing for chunks, but it is still very much a Peter Cushing vehicle with Christopher Lee in it, although quite an ensemble. And this is also quite an ensemble, but it's much more of a Christopher Lee vehicle with Peter Cushing in it, and a little bit of Telly Savalas. Oh, loves you, baby. So we have Horror Express from 1972, a Spanish-British co-production. So not from Hammer, not from Amicus. It's from Benimar Films and Granada Films. Hello, mother. Hello, father. Here I am at Camp Granada Films. The main cast, as I said, Cushing, Lee, Telly Savalas, and then a bunch of Spanish character actors who some horror hounds will recognise from like Manchester Morgan things and whatnot, but nobody. Helga Line's probably our most famous, and Helga Line's hardly that famous. Jean Martin directed it, but it's a pseudonym for Eugenio Martin. Horror Express. Here's something cool as well. Remember I mentioned the Arrow postcards thing? Well, the postcard you get for this one is for Edgar Wright's first film, A Fistful of Fingers. This Blu-ray is nearly 4 years old, and this is still to come out from Arrow. Oops. I'm sure there's just some hold up. Edgar Wright's a rather busy gentleman, and we did have a worldwide pandemic, so I won't be on their cases for that, although I would love to see it because I love Edgar Wright. So the story here concerns an expedition in the early 1900s in China, where Christopher Lee's party have led said expedition to uncover this prehistoric creature and take it back, presumably to the UK for study. That's the plot. The story, though, is that shit goes south pretty much straight away. When it's being loaded onto the train for removal from said China, it already causes a little bit of bother. One thief who tries to open the locker to see what's inside and what he can nick, he instantly has his eyeballs turned white and bleeding. We see a very Rasputin looking monk, which might have taken Christopher Lee back a few years, given he'd played Rasputin in 66, I want to say, for Hammer. And we meet Peter Cushing's character, who is wonderfully daffy and very British, impossibly British. We'll go into that in a minute. And by the way, Christopher Lee's wig in this, everything. No wig for Telly Savalas though. No wig. So let's get this open. So the train essentially becomes a character. It becomes almost Murderer on the Orient Express with meets the Thing. Well, it's got jaundice there. With meets the Thing with a very British tone. I mean, there's your creature there, but it doesn't stay in that form. So the creature has these glowing red eyes, and it can suck your memories and absorb them into its own consciousness and knowledge. And we find out the creature is from beyond the stars. And how are they going to get away with this? Because this creature, every time it does this to someone, picks up on their abilities, including knowledge, including combat skills, etc., etc. And even when they kill it, it can move its consciousness on to the next person. I'll skip that and come back to it in a second. So gradually it turns in from one of those, look at this wonderful artwork of Peter Cushing there. It turns from one of those nonsense, this can't be possible. It doesn't stay on that too long, because that always irritates me when something is plainly obvious and the cast won't believe it. Very quickly, the cast all believe this is happening. So Christopher Lee, there's no half hour where he says, rubbish, this is total nonsense, I will conduct my research. There's none of that. It goes straight from rubbish to, I shouldn't have done this, should I? Fuck. Whoops. What are we going to do about it? So this millions of years old creature that they have awakened is amok on this train. And although they've killed the husk, the consciousness now abides. It's a being of pure energy, and it can move from person to person. And that's where the analogy to the Thing comes in, because there's a scene where, oh boy, this is the most Peter Cushing thing ever. There's a scene where the police detective says, "It could be any one of us." And Peter Cushing says of himself and Christopher Lee, "Well, it can't be us, We're British." Wonderful. So just when you think the film, okay, it's got half an hour left, it needs a little bit of kick up the backside just to maybe give it, push it forward into that upper echelon of really top tier horror. What happens? Well, they've got a telegram that they've written ahead to the next station and said, "Weird shit going down, send Cossacks." And that telegram must have got mixed up, because they didn't send Cossacks, they sent Kojaks. Hey, they tell us Kojak. So Kojak the Cossack, he and his men come in, and boy, do they give the film a kick up the backside. He gets everybody into a room and basically says, "I will kill every single person in here if I have to. Doesn't bother me. I don't care. I'll get away with it." But will he? Will he be able to do that? Or has it already affected someone else who's maybe not in the... I won't go into spoilers, because I think of the two, you're much more likely to have either seen Hound of the Baskervilles or at least seen a version of, whereas Horror Express has a delightful third act, an absolutely delightful third act, where it's not so much about guessing, but it's just about, how are they going to get out of this? And, you just want to see our plucky heroes. And it is so good to see Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing playing friends. And, well, they're not quite friends. They're colleagues who become friends through this horrible circumstance. But it's such a wonderful, wonderful film. Absolutely recommended. Again, it's a 10 out of 10. There's a reason why I plumbed for these two back to back. And being from Arrow Video, we get commentary with Stephen Jones and Kim Newman, which is fantastic. I remember listening to that for the first time. Filmmaker Steve Haberman offers up an appreciation of the film. Night Train to Nowhere, Ted Newsom on Horror Express and his late friend, producer Bernard Gordon. Murder on the Trans-Siberian Express, oh, they stole my pun there. An archival interview with the director, Eugenio Martin. Notes from the Blacklist, producer Bernard Gordon on working in Hollywood during the McCarthy era. Telly and Me, an archival interview with composer John Kakavas, which sounds Greek, so I wonder if he did have some kind of familiar relationship with Telly Savalas. Archival introduction by Chris Alexander, theatrical trailer, and some wonderful artwork by Graham Humphreys, who always does these terrific covers. And on this is one of my favourite Arrow releases ever, not just for the film, but what you get. So isolated music, which maybe not everybody appreciates that, but this is a James Bernard score, folks. New audio commentary with Marcus Hearn and Jonathan Rigby does all the commentaries on all the Hammer films because he knows his stuff. So Marcus Hearn, literally the Hammer historian, and Jonathan Rigby, writer of English Gothic, the definitive book on Gothic cinema from the UK, and Euro Gothic and American Gothic. So when I talk Gothic cinema, talk to Jonathan Rigby. Released The Hound. It's not about Mr. Burns from The Simpsons, unfortunately. A brand new documentary looking at the genesis and making of the Hammer classic, featuring interviews with Hound Mask creator Margaret Robinson, film historian Kim Newman, who's back from our commentary there, and Mark Gatiss, who of course created or co-created Sherlock for the BBC, and they did their own version of Hound of the Baskervilles with Russell Tovey starring as the equivalent of Sir Henry. This is one of the coolest things. A featurette looking at the late great Andrew Morell, best of British, and his work with Hammer, an underappreciated legend who should be up there with the Cushings and Lees if he'd lived a little longer or was a little younger at the time. A 1986 documentary called The Many Faces of Sherlock Holmes. This is terrific. It might still be on YouTube. A 1986 documentary where Christopher Lee goes through all the different versions up to date. And for 1986, it goes straight up to Jeremy Brett. So it goes from the very first silent adaptations through Basil Rathbone, of course, straight up to Jeremy Brett, who he talks about as being, perhaps the definitive Holmes. And for many of us, regardless of my opinion of this, because Peter really only did this, and then the BBC one was extremely low budget by this standard, Jeremy Brett's version is wonderful, which is out on Bluray as well. And then Christopher Lee, an archive interview on which the actor looks back on his role as Henry Baskerville, and excerpts of Hound of the Baskervilles read by Christopher Lee, theatrical trailer, reversible sleeve, blah blah blah. So just another masterpiece by Hammer from the late 50s, produced by the great Terence Fisher and whatnot. But there's your, whoops it is. there's your more salacious poster that you would have had at the time, see? Which I like that, but that's very much the poster you would have to sell an audience on the terror and the horror, which again is a smart move when you're Hammer, you're coming off of Dracula and Frankenstein and whatnot. But for me, because I'm a saddo that way, you could sell me on just the fact that Peter Cushing, Christopher Lee and Andrew Morell are doing a film together. I would, it could be a romantic comedy where they are three gay dads and two of them are potential sperm donors, and one of them feels like a gooseberry. I don't think Hammer ever made that film, but I might pitch it to the new Hammer. Okay, well, that was my brief 25-minute look at two films, but it deserves it. I mean, it's two films, so 12 minutes of film. yeah, I think they both deserve at least that for an appreciation of two wonderful, wonderful films to watch this Halloween season. One a much more traditional gothic, and one a really fun, very strangers on a train kind of film. So whatever you do though, just enjoy your watches and stay very safe out there, regardless of whether it's on the Dartmoor moors or on the trains. There's always something out there. Love and mercy, my dears. Love and indeed mercy.